There we go. We're live. Hey,
Yay!
everyone. Welcome to Women of the Military podcast, live spotlight. Patricia and I did the interview for the podcast a long time ago. She was asking me about my race that I did in early February, and now it's March, and I haven't been running at all. But her episode is going live this week, and I wanted to talk to her more because we talked a lot about her experience in the military, and we touched on the book she wrote, Moms in the Military, but we didn't go as deep into it as I wanted to. We ran out of time with the podcast, so this is another way that we can share the stories and talk. So welcome, Patricia. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I too am very excited. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about who you are and what you did, just so people have a little bit of background if they haven't listened to the podcast episode yet.
Okay. Well, I am Patricia Qaiyyim. I was in the Air Force for 23 years. I served on active duty. I held several jobs because I like to spice it up a little bit, but I was an aerospace ground equipment technician. I was a paralegal. I was an MTL, and I finished out my career as a first sergeant, which was by far the best job I had. I really enjoyed being a first sergeant, and that was my last job in the Air Force. Since then, I was a contractor for quite a bit. I opened up an event planning business, and then I decided to follow my passion professionally for writing. And so that is where I am. I am now a professional writer.
Yeah, and you just released Moms in the Military, which I
Yes.
really liked your book because it reminded me a lot of women of the military, and
Mhm.
that it's lots of questions and then the answers of different women, and it's kind of a different topic. We don't really talk about moms in the military a lot, and you covered so many different aspects of service. So why did you want to write a book about moms in the military?
You know, throughout my career and even after my career, I would always get questions from not so much my fellow service women, but from other people like, how can you do that? What about leaving your kids? Isn't it hard? Why would you want to do that? And so I thought I wanted to let people know because I don't think it's hard to do. I do think it's a unique job and I think it requires a lot, but it's not impossible. And then I also found out that other women said they got the same thing. Like, how can you do that? And I met women who said, I've never left my child for more than a couple of days. And I was like, oh, well, that's very nice. But that was just not my experience. And so I wanted to write this book to show people and to let people know how it is we do it and why we do it. And I didn't want it to be just my story. So I interviewed 20 other women from an E3 to an O7, and they were in the active duty reserve, and I included spouses, and it was also it was Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard. I wanted to get a very broad perspective, and I wanted to give a variety of insights. I know the Marine Corps mission is very different from the Air Force mission, which is very different from the Army mission. So I wanted everybody's perspective, and we talked about things like the decision to either come on active or come into the armed forces or stay in the armed forces once you become a mom. How your family might have reacted. We talked about raising a child without that familial support. You know, most of the time we're not down the street from mom or across town from our siblings, so we don't have that help. We also talked about the impact of deployments and TDYs. We talked about some of the rewards. We talked about some of the fears and regrets, and just some advice. It was really just talking about the experience of being a mom in the armed forces, what it takes, what we felt, what we experienced.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to read all the different responses because there were like themes. Like you did get a wide variety of experiences, but there's more commonalities than there are differences. And so a lot of
Yes.
the ways that people coped and dealt with different things, there was like definite themes for each of the questions, even though you had such a wide variety of people who wrote.
Yes, it was definitely an underlying theme throughout. One thing, like, especially when we talked about our kids, a lot of the moms, while we were proud to have served and glad we or are serving, we do question, is this right for our child? You know, all the moving, missing, important dates, having to go away. We also talked about, another one was definitely the raising a child without that familial support. Almost everyone said, you find your family where you are. whether they called it a tribe or a village, you find that group. Maybe it's in your church, maybe it's at work, maybe it's just your friends, who your counterparts. But it's important that you do that, because that becomes your support system. And they talked about, they really became like family. Like, they keep in touch with them for decades. I know my first mom I met was Renee. She was a spouse, and we're still friends, and we were only stationed, her husband and my husband did the same job, and we were only stationed together twice, but not even together. Once they were in Germany and we were in Spain, but we were close. And I still consider her part of my family. She's watched my kids. I've watched her kids. It was like having a sister, So, and I think everyone kind of talked about finding that familial support where you are. So that was really good to hear. And I think I want this book to be a source of encouragement. And so when other moms are reading this, especially if they're new to the military or they're new to motherhood, this would be not necessarily a guide, but a book of encouragement where they can connect and see that they're not alone in this journey.
Yeah, I think the questions you answered and then all the different experiences does help you not feel so alone, because it can be really isolating, especially if you don't know anyone else who's in this type of situation. Because I mean, military women are still a minority, and then moms are a smaller minority, so it can be really challenging to connect with other people. So I love how you writing a book and getting experiences from so many people can help it so that you aren't so lonely in that journey.
Yes. And just yesterday, I was out at Fort Sam Houston here in Texas, and I met a young recruit. She is in training, but she also is a mom. And so, she did have questions, and she was like, we talked for, maybe 10 minutes about my experiences. And, she flipped through the book, and, I thought that's who I want this book to go to. That's who I want to see this, because I don't want her to feel like, as she starts this journey, that it's impossible. And it's not a journey for everybody, but if it's one you want to take, you don't have to do it alone. You'll find that there are other moms serving in the armed forces, whether they're on active duty, reserve guard, or spouses. We're all in the boat together, and we all can connect and support one another.
Yeah, it's all about community and support and not doing it alone. I love that.
Definitely. Yeah.
So you said you got a wide variety of experience. How did you find the women that are in your book?
Well, gosh, some I knew from my service. One was someone I met when I first got here. Actually, my husband and my kids moved here first, and she went to the same church, and she kind of took my daughter under her wing, and we became friends. And so she was in my book. I got some names from you. I reached out to people I knew and said, hey, I'm writing a book. And people I had just met, I think you and I had only been in the same webinars at different points. And so I had checked out your podcast, and I thought you might. So I reached out to you. I reached out to people I'd worked with before. I actually I saw someone in the store. I think it was our grocery store. She had on PT gear. She had 2 kids with her. And I just stopped her and I said, hey, you look like you might be a mom in the military. And I told her about my book. I gave her my card, and she reached back. And so she was, more than happy to interview with me. So it was really just reaching out to different avenues that I had.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved getting to read the answers of the stories of the past podcast guests, because I knew a little bit about who they were. And so their names meant more because I had a relationship with them. And so it was fun to hear, because I don't always touch motherhood on the podcast. So it was another, I think that's like one of the cool parts about the podcast is like, you only have like less than an hour to get as many questions and many pieces of the story as you can. And like, we can't cover everything. So there's still, more to hear, more to experience. And so I love that.
Yeah. So it's been great. And it was a lot of fun writing it. It was a lot of fun meeting all of the ladies. And we did it really during COVID. So we did most of them, if not all of them, were done on Zoom. So technology was great, but it was really nice. And they were all over the country. One was moving, and she was like, we just PCS, but I said we're going to do this. And so I'm going to set up in the bedroom and we're just going to do it. So it was really, really, someone was TDY when we talked. So it was really, I really appreciated them taking the time, and I hope they appreciate it, but I felt that they were willing to go to these lengths. They must also be passionate about. And we talked about everything from, when you're first a mom and you have to, you're breastfeeding and expressing milk and going TDY with that, or, being pulled from a TDY because you found out you were pregnant. All of those things. They even talked about like what keeps you in. That was another one of the questions. And she said really she'd been getting out since she got in. So she said she came in with the intent of doing 4 years, and now she's retirement eligible. But she loves doing what she does, and most of them talking about being a voice for other moms and for women. And that's what kept them in, or that's what keeps them in. And so it was really, like you said, to hear their stories. And even when I read over it afterwards, I could almost hear their voices in their comments, so it was a lot of fun to do this project.
Yeah, and you get to meet other women veterans and start building your community. And I
Yeah.
love the theme of like wanting to support each other. And I think sometimes as a woman in the military or as a veteran, you can feel really isolated and forget that
Yes.
like you have this community of support. So it's really fun to see another book written in a similar type of fashion where we're bringing all these stories together and highlighting them.
Yeah. Because you can, like you said, we really are a minority. Women are a minority in the armed forces. And then when you add moms onto that, and so you can sometimes feel like, am I the only one? But to meet these women and to see that they're still continuing to meet. And even after I wrote the book, I've met a lot of other veterans, and it's been very good. I met Lila Holly and Lisa Furman, and just talking with them and hearing their story. And they're also veterans and authors. And so we're all writing about women in the military, but from different perspectives. And so it was very exciting to meet them and to like continue to build my community of veteran sisters, as much as I did my Air Force, active duty sisters when I was on active duty.
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed Lila, and she is such an
Oh, yeah.
inspiration with all the books that she is working to not
Yeah.
only write herself, but then bring other women in and share what she's learned to help other women veterans tell stories. So I think that's really awesome.
It is, and I think between all of us, we're getting them from beginning to end. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about your book, "The Girl's Guide to the Military." I think that is a huge uh, compliment to any young woman thinking about coming in and having that information up front. I met one lady about a week ago, and she, talked about her recruiter, and how she felt misinformed and different things. To have the Girl's Guide to the Military is really, it's going to give you a step up. It's going to give you a leg up. It's going to give you some background basic information to help you. And all the way through, there are books about, Lila writing about transition, and Lisa, she writes about trauma. And so it's just, it looks like we're getting them from beginning to end. And I think when we put these books out there, it's going to reach more women, and more women are going to be piqued. Their interest is going to be piqued about the military, and it might inspire them to take that journey as well. So I think your book is a wonderful start for anyone thinking about. And I told my daughter is a teacher. I said, you guys should get this for your ROTC class, because they have ROTC at her school. And so she's going to look through it and see if they're interested. So I think it would be a good book for especially young women in ROTC, junior ROTC.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you so much. That's really kind to hear. And it is true. Like we have books from like all different aspects and all different stories, and more women are writing about their experience or writing books in general. And so it's really exciting to connect with you, hear not only your story of service, but how you're continuing to serve by writing. Do you have anything else in the pipeline that you're working on?
I do actually. I just finished a collection of poems. It is with some beta readers, so I'm hoping to publish that this year. I don't have a title yet, but it's a collection of poems, and I talk about everything from community to love to faith to trauma to mental health. It's a whole range of poetry, different types of poems. So that's coming out this year. But I am also in the very beginning phases of a companion book to moms in the military. After talking with the women and talking to other moms, we all kind of wonder, is this right? Is this right? And so I've decided to do a companion book called Raised in the Military. And what I will do is I will interview kids who were raised by moms in the military. I'm hoping to get at least half the women in my book to have their children participate. Of course, I'm going to ask my own children have agreed to do it, but I want to write about children who were raised in the military by moms to kind of get their perspective. And I think that would be good for moms who are raising their kids, moms who did and wonder if it's right. But also, I think for kids who are in that phase, whether you you come into it as a young child because your mom, your mom decides to join later, or you just are just starting out and you have questions like all the moves you have to do. I know my kids moved every 3 years. It was like clockwork pretty much. But also, being the new kid, having your mom go away. So I wanted to kind of get that perspective. And I think it would be a big help for young kids or kids that are now being raised in the military to know you're not alone, that it's okay, that you're going to survive, because, when they're at certain ages, they don't want to move. They have their friends. They kind of like it where they are. And so you have to pack up and move again. Always feeling like you're a new kid on the block, or even, for us, our kids we only went home once or twice a year, mostly once a year. And so, sometimes, especially my younger, she would say that she felt more like a stranger than family because of her cousins who grew up together. And then, once a year you come in and you try and fit in. And she didn't always feel like she fit, she was fitting in. And so it was, I think that's an experience that we all worry about, whether you are on active duty or reservist or a spouse. You're going to be moving at some point, and you worry about those things. And so I think it would be nice to hear from a military brat's perspective what it was like to have a mom in the military.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a really cool idea and something that we don't hear a lot about. April is the month of the military child, and so on the
yes.
podcast next month, I interviewed 2 women veterans who are also military kids, and we got
Oh,
to talk about how being in the military, or being military kids, affected their, decision to serve and how it affected them. And so I
mhm.
think it's really important to hear those stories from military kids because we
Yes.
talk about how military kids are resilient, but
Mhm.
also military kids experience so much and it's hard. And,
Yes.
sometimes those things, they hurt more
Yeah.
than, you can't just bounce back from
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And they remember those things and they have to deal with those things. And I know one of the moms in my book, her child, she was a single mom for most of her daughter's life. I think she was maybe 5 or 6 when her daughter was 5 or 6 when she got a divorce. But her daughter was like, I will not join. She was like, I saw what my mom had to do and it's just not for me. And she has agreed to be in my book. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what she has to say. But yeah, not all good. But I think it could be a source of encouragement for other kids to know, okay, I'm not alone. I can get through this. And there are some good things about being a military brat. I think I'm not a military brat,
yeah.
but I raised 3. So I feel like there was some good, but like you said, there's also some that's not, there's some things that aren't so good. And so to hear them talk about it, firsthand, it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great. Well, I'm really glad that we got to do this live and that you got to have your podcast episode go live. It's going live tomorrow. So if you're watching, you can check that out. And just thank you so much for being a guest and for doing this live interview.
Thank you for what you do. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your Women of the Military. I think it's great. We're getting it out there, and I think what you do is great, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. I feel blessed to be a part of Women in the Military. So thank you.
Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you.